Welcome back, everyone. Let's crack on with our first panel today and tomorrow's technology. The UK rail industry, as TUFIC set up, is facing a complex mix of legacy infrastructure, fragmented digital systems, and a growing skills gap, all while trying to meet ambitious sustainability targets and navigate policy uncertainty. So we will dive into all of that with our panel. We've got Alan Peters, the Ecosystem Director for Rail and Stations at Connected Places Catapult, Taron Smart, Senior Program Manager at Network Rail, Anjay Raj, Head of Engineering for the East Coast Digital Programme, and Kelly Demian, Partner at EY. Taron, can I start with you? What is Network Rail doing to embed new technologies?
Thank you, and good morning to everyone. Yes, I think when it comes to embedding new technologies, we obviously are at the cutting edge of delivering a good timetable for our passengers, striving towards a greener and more ecological, sustainable future. We look at lots of evidence of usability cases, which we serve to our clients, which in this case will be the routes and the regions. We're looking to make things safer as well. We're trying to move away from old methods of working, which we're very much manually handling. We're embracing new technology, like all the various methods of gaining track information from onboard equipment, from drones, from autonomous machines, which we run on the railway. And then the second phase of that is taking that all that information back into Network Rail and actually analysing the data and seeing where we can pinpoint faults, where we can actually analyse data. We have a whole system dedicated to the analytics of this to help us plan, not just for this sector or this period, but for far longer into the future, and working with teams that are working on modelling around weather and weather extremes and challenges they possess. We were able to build up this layered picture of what the technology will look like in the future, not to mention the overlapping embeddation of future traffic control systems known as ETCS and how that would digitalize our whole rail network as a whole.
Alan, what would you say are the biggest barriers to adopting new technologies in rail?
Morning, everyone. And again, sort of briefly introducing CPC. So we're the UK's Innovation Accelerator for cities transport and place leadership. So we've got across the whole, all of the 9 catapults, 63 sites, and we're helping at the moment 8,000 SMEs. So all about innovation. I lead a team, and touching on the skills point that we've talked around already, I lead a team that's truly multidisciplinary. That's what's needed at the moment in rail. So we've got systems engineering, economic modelling, and human factors, and we always need those in the innovation projects that we lead. In terms of the barriers, I think this has come as no surprise to anyone. It's never really the technology. It's all around that second valley of death. I think we see some really nice trials. We have those trials well championed. How do you move beyond that? How do you actually commercialize that? And that gets into these slightly more intractable problems like cultural inertia, product acceptance, the sort of boundaries around organizations and the mismatches between the remit that an organization has versus the control of the levers that it can pull. And that's the area that we're increasingly focusing on at the moment. It's all very well sort of getting that really nice pipeline, the funnel of great ideas trialed, and I think the UK as a whole is very good at doing that. But how do you actually get them embedded into be business as usual, and how do you measure that in a meaningful way? And I think the transition to GBR does offer that opportunity to centralise those innovation ownerships and streamline that activity. But obviously, there's plenty of work to be done in that space.
And Kelly, just picking up on that, would you echo those as the major challenges that the railway is seeing in terms of accelerating the use of technology?
Yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to just reflect on the kind of human and organizational challenges and our opportunity if we get adoption right. So Tufik talked about the deep and serious adoption problem in the railway earlier, and based on EY's experience delivering technology-enabled transformation in the rail for the last 10 years, I think our experience tells us that introducing any new technology in rail needs to have like a very clear why story, right? Where the benefits and the outcomes are understood. My EY colleagues are talking later about their experience delivering the Rail Hub solution, and that had a really clear why story around safe working on or near the line, right? And frontline teams were able to understand that and get behind that. Another thing that we see is to get right is sponsorship. So having like an influential, credible leader driving the change. It takes a very special kind of leader to be able to overcome the barriers to change, whether they're organizational, cultural, commercial, as you were talking about, Alan. Um, and technology needs to be designed with user needs at the center. And when you're running a 24/7 railway, time and capacity is a challenge. So you need to meet people where they are. You need to co-create in the field, and sometimes that means meeting people, at a shift change at 10 o'clock at night. And so, my reflection is really, overcoming that adoption challenge rarely has to do with the technology itself. And our opportunity is really just to remember that the railway is ultimately about people and customers at the end of the day.
Interestingly, Nicholas Richards has sent in a question saying that he's a researcher from TfL at UEL, and to date, getting approval for new Century equipment has proved expensive to the point he's had to step back. The biggest obstacle is on-track testing. Is that, I don't know if Taron, you're the best person to pick that up, but is that one of the problems, that actually, you can have all these ideas, but actually trying to test them out is an incredibly tricky thing to do?
No, that is the case. We do have 2 testing centres, and there's another one being built in Wales, which I think is not too far off completion, which is going to be a model example of future testing facilities will have. But yes, a railway does run 24/7, and we do have to get possessions. We do have to make sure that we can still provide the timetable. It is a bit tricky. It is challenging. I can imagine in TfL, for TfL-centric systems, when would they actually get the chance to do that? I think we're slightly more flexible with our national rail, but it is always going to be a challenge. Like I say, our testing facilities, are there, but it's actually getting the owners to actually do it as well. I forget the actual acronym for it now, but the new Centre for Rail Excellence in Wales, I think will be coming online quite soon, and that will provide us another huge capability of it, in the fact that it's being built in such a way that it's almost going to be built with all the problems built into it, so we can test out all the various things around that. But yeah, possessions on a working railway is very, very hard. But it is one of those things that you have to strive for. You have to figure this out in your project planning. You have to do your advance requests and planning for possessions, ensuring that it's a safe time to test things, and it's all part of the process, really. I don't think we've struggled too much, but I think that comes from foresight planning of where we are with our projects.
Alan, by the way, gets the prize for coming up with the acronym, which is apparently GCRE. I could have claimed I knew it. I would have been
Global Centre for Rail Excellence.
Excellent. Well done, Alan. Anjay, let's hope your mic is back and sorted with us. You were telling us about the biggest technological problems that you've got with the East Coast Digital Programme and how you're overcoming those.
So the biggest technological challenge we have on the East Coast Digital Programme is integrating 6 different suppliers' ETCS products on the railway, but doing it on a very busy railway on the East Coast Main Line between King's Cross and Peterborough, and doing that at scale with 30 different organisations, which involve train operating companies, Network Rail, the actual suppliers I was referring to, and doing that in a very complicated industry structure that Tufik was referring to in terms of assurance approvals. So bringing all that together and then putting that on the railway and operating it safely and delivering a high-performing system is quite a challenge on any digital program, but I find on this one is especially challenging given the complexity of the different organisations involved.
Craig Solly asks, is there a synergy between railway engineering, say in the rolling stock, and general IT systems? It seems to me that these are separate entities which need to be made closer if we want an integrated railway. Anjay, you're nodding along. Go on.
I couldn't agree more. I think the concept of railway engineering is something that we need to start talking about more as an industry. As these technologies merge, and we need to look at the whole thing as one as we move to GBR, it's incredibly important that we recognise the skill set of a railway engineer. and they're the ones that can look at the whole system, think about the interdependencies between how a train's driven, how a signaller manages the railway, what a passenger thinks about how the railway operates, and frankly, passenger doesn't care whether it's Network Rail or a train operating company. You just want to get from A to B. So having an engineering skill set and a mindset that recognizes that all these things come together and eventually we're delivering a service for the customer and we actually engineer the right solutions for the customer is something that we just need to make business as usual in the industry.
Jean-Hugo Beringer has gone straight to the point here. I love this question. The technology already exists and has been proven, such as ERTMS and CBTC systems widely used across Europe, not to mention the highly advanced technologies in Asia. How do you explain the gap between the UK's rail infrastructure and that of the rest of Europe? Who fancies picking up that one?
The easiest way to say that would be is we are working with a railway which is fundamentals, the backbone of which was built 200 years ago. We are facing challenges, both commercial and deployment. We have been signed up to and in line with a lot of the work within Europe under the European Union joint undertaking, which is progressing from GSMRS controlled train systems, moving on to the second phase of BFRCMS, and then on to ETCS, which will actually build to. So it's a progressive layer of how we have to build up to it. There's no one big bang solution we can just turn on tomorrow that's going to actually work. There's a lot of development that just needs to take place. We need to have a digitalization of our railway first to enable a lot of this. And it's simply a question of we can't shut down the railway to do this. We have to maintain the railway. The old adjective of doing heart surgery while the patient is still alive is very much the situation we're facing. When you're building new stuff, like, for example, if we take the SkyTrain in Bangkok or some of the new rails in the Emirates, these are built from scratch, so you can easy to layer on all the latest and newest equipment. It's a very hard thing to do when you have to make sure that you can move around 4.2 million people a year on its current networks. As we know, look at the challenges London is facing this week because there's no tube strikes. And imagine if we have to do that regularly to upgrade it, it just would not be financially viable for the greater economy of the country as a whole.
Alan, how can testbeds, real-world trials accelerate the adoption of these new technologies in the rail sector, given what Taron's saying, that you're running on something that has to keep working while you're trying to do this?
Yeah, and I think we've talked around the sort of the role of test sites. There's other ways that you can do testing, sort of including in real life settings. So we've got a project running in Bristol Temple Meads. We've turned that into an innovation zone. The logic really being behind that was similar to the sentiment expressed already on this panel, that people were finding it very difficult to test their equipment or their processes in a live environment. So can you do all of the hard work behind the scenes to set up things like data sharing agreements, access agreements, sort of almost triaging the product approval, such that you can then do batches of innovation very quickly, do the interesting, exciting stuff very quickly without constantly having to sort of set up a test bed every time in a separate place. So there's real economies of scale of doing that. It's something like a station. What's really interesting, I think, with that approach is the use cases that come out. So you start off trying to sort of understand what problems you want to solve, but as you get more and more people involved and hopefully enthused about innovation in their space, so in a station environment, it's the station teams, the maintainers, all of the people that make that station work, as they sort of experience the thought of looking ahead and working out what their sort of future station looks like, you get all these much richer use cases that come out, and they're the proper use cases. They're the things where there's big inefficiencies, there's systems that just make less logical sense. That's the sort of value of a sort of a test bed approach, and you start to see that sort of richness of organisations coming together, working together, and hopefully, if you get it right, and we're starting to see elements of this at the Temple Meads zone, people starting to put their own investment in as well. So you get this sort of rolling stone gathering moss type approach, and you can then do batches of innovation in a live environment very quickly. I think what I'd like to see from a sort of UK perspective is if we could do that at scale in other types of environments as well. So we've talked already around some of the use cases around line side type technologies. So could we actually have a part of the network to be a live innovation zone, and I know there are certain geographical areas that have already been proposed to do that. Could we even have a sort of rolling stock innovation zone as well, as other European countries have, with a large number, 5-10 organisations, all pooling efforts, resources and thinking onto one combined innovation zone? I think that, to me, that helps you start to address this sort of second valley of death, and you've got multiple energy in there, and you've also got multiple funding, and you've also got lots of people then who can potentially take those ideas on and commercialize it as well. But as I say, it takes the first part is where the hard work is, and that's where you've got to sort of overcome this economies of scale question, that it has to be worth setting up a test bed in order to actually get the benefits of doing it downstream.
Andrew, did you want to come in?
Yeah, it's imperative that we get this right. For me, there's a huge opportunity here to not just simulate and emulate systems and really use the offsite testing capability to prove the safety of the systems, but actually its operability and its reliability and the capability of the railway as a whole. We can do so much more offsite now than we could do even 10 years ago. And I think that the technology is in front of us, the opportunities in front of us. What we have to do is create the industry environment to do that. What I mean by that is people have to trust that information without requiring to be repeated in the field. And that requires some safety approvals, requires some consultation with the unions potentially on how we validate things. But the technology is there. We're trusting it for all other purposes. There's no reason why we couldn't trust it here. And I come from an environment where we've done that before at TfL already. So I certainly think there's precedence for the main line.
Grant Kilmore says that he learnt yesterday that although ETCS could ultimately provide driverless trains, the current NR-Long strategy specifically doesn't mention pursuing this option because of the potential union issues. With driver availability being a key driver of delay and cancellations for many operations, how do we shift the culture to focus on safe innovation and not fear of union opposition? Is that another one for you, Taron? Are you getting all the nasty ones here? The tricky ones.
I would say that, look, the railway within Network Rail's responsibility is the infrastructure. We are responsible for the track, for the station, for the signals, for the power to that. We very much don't really have much control over the drivers or drivers' unions or the rolling stocks or the train operators. Our job is to provide a safe, ecological and efficient infrastructure for them to run on. Yes, the technology is there, and I think it will be a case of time will catch up to it, and eventually we'll be in that position where it is. I mean, the role of there's been a lot of bad press about the drivers this week for obvious reasons in London, but it's still a very fundamental safety issue, and the whole public perception of that is our railway is safe. We have an exceptional world-leading safety record for what we provide at Network Rail. The technology will catch up with us. We will be in a position in the future where we will have possibly a lot more integrated and closed systems that will run for us autonomously. But I think we're a few years away from that for various reasons as well.
Alan, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, I mean, I think with automation, you look to borrow what other sectors are doing, and it's automation and subset of all the activities around AI is coming on really quickly. You've just got to use it for the right use cases, and you've got to see it as a combined system. I think, and you've always got to maintain the same level of safety, or indeed use that type of technology to actually show that you can enhance safety. So it's that sort of gradual journey, but was it Rail 200 this year, 200 years since the rail network was created? It has changed considerably in that time. It is continuing to change. So automation will be increasingly a part, but it won't be necessarily the sort of headlines, the big driverless train type parts, but it'll be other use cases that gradually build up this sort of greater picture of automation as the technology becomes available and it becomes trusted and validated.
Andrew, did you want to add something as well on that?
Yeah, I just want to make one point around the specific point around driver availability. So there are innovations in that space already there, and I think the Elizabeth line already uses an innovation to integrate stock and crew management with the way the railways run in the ROC, in the control centre. So there's innovations there which will improve, and already have, so as we can all tell from those travelling Elizabeth line, offer quite a high quality service, and actually some of that is down to some of the innovations around stock and crew management that are integrated into the way the service is offered. So I think that there's different ways to solve the problem, and it's not always just making things driverless.
It's staying slightly with the union theme, but Martin Abrams says that tens of thousands of workers across all grades and sectors in the railway and unions have always adapted to embrace new technologies, but it's increasing concern that the primary aim and motivating factor for the rollout of new technologies is once again to reduce headcount. Can you illustrate what engagement you're having or will have with the trade unions to ensure that frontline workers on the railway are part of this transition?
I think when we embed new technologies onto the railway, we often have, and one of the first and foremost things is, does this reduce boots on ballast, as we say? Does this make it safer? We've lost way too many colleagues over the last couple of years from accidents happening on the railways. So this new technology is actually making our workforce safer in a lot of cases. We obviously have to consult with our unions and our family of workers to ensure that they are happy with these things and progressive. And in most cases, what we're delivering from the Chief Technical Office of Network Rail is that enhanced layer of safety. We want to not have people walking up and down tracks at 2 o'clock in the morning, hoping that that freight train isn't coming through. The idea is this technology we're embedding and embracing is helping us to make the railway a safer place to work. The old catchphrase we always had was everyone at home safe every day, and we stand by that. We would rather face, and I'm sure the unions will agree with this, we'd rather embrace new technology if it makes it safer.
Kelly?
And I was just going to add, just as a principle, the successful technology programs always have union engagement up front, really early on and consistently throughout that program, right? So I think like that's absolutely a get right here.
Okay, I just wanted to pick up with you as well, because I know you're very hot on the skills shortage. Richard Horridge is saying many successful initiatives have been led and delivered by Network Rail rather than the supply chain. Will Network Rail and later GBR invest in retaining and upskilling in-house talent who are placed closer to the problems they're trying to solve? I mean, it's a key thing, isn't it? Upskilling the workforce and closing that skills gap.
Yeah, absolutely. And Taron, feel free to come in because I know that you're passionate about this as well. But I think that the railway's full of people who are passionate about the industry. And it's one of the reasons why I love working in the sector. And I see this purpose and passion as a superpower to attract new and different skills to the industry. And I'd love to see that reinvigorated as a part of GBR. And to drive technology adoption, the railway is going to need skills in data analysis, data science, data engineering, human-centered design, you name it. And that's really different than the primary skill sets it has today. So yes, I mean, there is a skill shortage in infrastructure generally. When you think about the National Infrastructure Plan, you know, that absolutely applies to rail, and there's an aging workforce, but I think the demographic around the type of talent that the railway needs is changing, and these technological skills are in demand everywhere. And so I think that the industry is going to have to get creative about how they attract and retain and develop this talent. And this is where I think partnerships are really key. In some cases, the railway may need to borrow talent from elsewhere and explore secondments. And I think that the railway should embrace talent mobility in this moment, moving people around the sector as track and train come together. So, and the thing that we forget is that people who are data scientists and engineers love an environment where they can have access to data, freedom to experiment, and like real life problems to solve. That's exciting for them. And I think it's in the railway's gift to create this environment and culture for them to thrive.
Andrew, did you want to add anything on that?
Yeah, so I think it's I mentioned the point about railway engineers earlier. A railway engineer of the past is not necessarily the railway engineer of the future. And I, in my experience, that we've blurred the boundaries consciously already in the deployment of digital systems by recognizing an engineering and ops need to come closer together. So the best engineers I've worked with are actually the ones that understand how to run the railway, and the best operators are the ones that understand the technology. So actually, mobility isn't just about moving engineers around and moving operators around. Mobility is actually about recognizing the skill set of the future railway is a very different skill set. And we should look to broader spaces than just the conventional spaces to find those people. And I've worked with some really, really talented people that, if you look at their badge, might suggest they're not appropriate for the role, but the experience and their knowledge, their interest demonstrates actually they are entirely capable of fulfilling those sorts of future roles for digital systems.
Just picking up James Connolly's sent in a question saying, we consistently find that rail programs and projects are constantly trying to reinvent the wheel when it comes to digital technologies applied on the track, as opposed to focusing on the elephant in the room, adoption, people, behaviour and culture. How can we as a sector bring the lower tier and smaller contractors on the digital journey? Is that pretty much picking up on what you were saying?
Somewhat. I think there's another angle to this. So using the East Coast Digital Programme as a case study, it's a program of partners. It's not necessarily a conventional enterprise like what we're used to with some of the other major programs. But what we have to do is to take all those organizations on the journey, because if we want to deliver a no signals railway, which is very different to conventionally signal railways, everyone needs to be on the journey. Everyone needs to be ready to adopt technology, ready to operate it, which means that even the smallest operator, a little charter heritage operator of a fleet of steam locos, for example, need to be ready to do that. So we're taking everyone on the journey by educating them on what this technology brings, walking them through the process to get ready, business ready to adopt it, walking through the process around regulatory approvals, authorization, and transferring the knowledge, and where necessary, moving people back to the mobility point into those organizations where necessary to support them. So we're taking all reasonable steps, I think, to be helpful. And I think that's why the partnership's so powerful for a program like this. And I certainly think that partnership approach of recognizing we're all in it together and we're here for the greater good is the way to go. And if we don't have that mindset and we leave people behind, we won't get to the end goal.
Alexandra Mikolis, I think that says, how are safety critical systems being evaluated for integration into broader digital rail programs?
I'll have it stab. I think it's quite an abstract question because it depends what is the safety critical system and what's the digital program. But I'll just set out some industry sort of setup. So there are multiple sort of organizational, regulatory, and sort of standardized ways of doing this, which include common safety method from a standards perspective, all the way through to the regulator, the ORR, in terms of what they do in terms of approvals to place into service. That's pretty well defined, and I think that's industry standard. What I would say, however, is it's set up for the scale of what we're about to undertake in the next 10, 15 years in terms of the digital programs. Have we set it up in such a way that everyone understands the roles responsible with so many organizations coming together? And most importantly, is it efficient? Is it effective in practice? Because in our experience in this industry, approvals takes a long time. So to answer the question simply, it's all set out in standards, whether it's a piece of technology on the side or the core digital signaling technology, it's all set out. My challenge that I'm working through from my capacity with the industry is to find a more efficient way to do that, because it's not sustainable as it is.
Alan, did you want to just jump in?
Yeah, and I think the rail industry, particularly in the UK, has a firm grasp of sort of standards and regulation, as Anjay says. I think where it gets interesting is when these types of future technologies come into play, these complex systems, these systems that may have an element of automation in them. And there it becomes a bit more challenging, and it's not just rail that will have to grapple with it. That this is the sort of realm of where you can't actually write a standard set of requirements for what a safety critical system needs to do. And at that point, you have to then start bringing in things like virtual testing. You have to start bringing in other approaches to give yourself the confidence that it is going to achieve that high level of safety that you need. And this is, I think, this is the interesting space in automation and AI at the moment. And safety critical industries like rail will follow other industries who are also working on this space. So nuclear and aviation are perhaps a couple of years ahead in trying to do this. It's something that's not going to be solved overnight. So it's a good question from that regard, because things will change slightly, but at the moment there are really good standards and regulations in play.
Sorry, go on, Andrew.
Sorry, I want to make one point on this, and I use an industry, just following Alan's point about other industries. The Boeing 737 MAX crashes is a classic example of where all the regulatory processes and checks were there, yet something failed and 350 people died. So we have to ask ourselves, what can we learn from that sort of experience from another industry, and whether we're set up for new technology deployment, which is what that ultimately was about, was innovation and modern technology within existing operational environments. And I just want to set that challenge out to all of us in the industry. We need to look out to other industries and learn from them.
If you are listening in, could you send your question to the next panel, because that is all about leveraging data and it's a data question. So if you could save that one for the next panel. Just before I go back to the questions, Kelly, I just wanted to ask you about AI. It is the big thing. How do you go about implementing AI and using the best of AI and not just sort of pummeling AI is going to be the solution to everything?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm seeing pockets of excitement and brilliance all over the sector when it comes to AI. But I think the railway needs collaboration, coherence, confidence, and capability. So I'll kind of unpack those in a minute. So, there's so many people working on use cases and pilots across the industry. So there really needs to be that collaboration across track and train to bring these together. There's so much to go after in predictive maintenance, customer experience, network operations, and collaboration between different parts of the railway and collaboration with technology partners and suppliers is absolutely key. So that's the first one. I think that there needs to be coherence around the plan to develop AI for the sector and a guiding mind. And we're really excited about the work that EY is doing with GBRX around the AI action plan for rail. And we're really starting to see that collaboration and coherence come to life. Um, Thirdly, I think there needs to be confidence that AI is being developed ethically and transparently. And this is where safe, responsible AI practices and guardrails are super, super important. And finally, the railway needs capability to successfully adopt AI. So this is the resources, the skills, the learning pathways, the data, the platforms, the processes to prioritize the use cases and to scale it. And building this capability is really about creating the right skill set, mindset, and tool set, laying the foundations for AI to be successful.
Alan, did you want to just come in and there? You were nodding away with that.
Just massively agreeing. Yeah, it needs that 360 degree approach, doesn't it? Really, and it takes time. I mean, I think the pockets of AI excitement is a really nice way of putting it. There's some things where we're already seeing genuine efficiency gains from using elements of automation, elements of AI. I use them interchangeably, probably badly. It's not going to be this wholesale change. Of course it's not. And I think, like any other safety critical industry, will just take its time and, as I said before, sort of apply it to the right use cases and apply it with the right combination of the things that humans are good at and will continue to be good at.
Taron, I think this is probably one for you, but with the new Network Rail regulations around safety critical communications trackside coming into force in March next year, how can suppliers of call recording software that solve this problem engage with the contractor base more effectively and get certification faster?
That would fall into our product acceptance team. Obviously, this will go through various stage gates. I think we have set up a system whereby it will be slightly more streamlined than it was previously to enable this, enabling deployment and rollout of that. I don't have direct contact with this, so I'm actually a little bit vague on the system. I just read a couple of reports about it, so maybe not a question for me.
The tricky one, because I think I'm wading through an awful lot of questions while trying to listen to you all. We have had 2 or 3 about cyber security, and as we move to a more AI automated driven thing, how do you protect against cyber attacks and make sure you are secure?
I'll start. Again, I guess I can use the East Coast Digital Programme as a case study, which I guess could extend to how we run the future railway. Digitization brings with it that risk inherently, and we can look at it in pockets and say, well, if everyone does their bit, we are secure. But all it requires is the weakest link, and suddenly the whole railway is exposed to a fundamental risk because of one failing somewhere. So I think, first of all, it's recognition that everyone carries that responsibility. It's not centralized. Everyone has to take ownership of that in the same way as we have conventionally taken ownership of safety. So security has to sit up there now alongside safety because it does have a safety impact if we are not secure. The second thing is actually to look at the sum of the parts. So on East Coast Digital Programme, while everyone does their part, all the partners, what we're doing with regards to cybersecurity integration is actually running a series of integration tests where we're going to put scenarios out there and we're going to play a railway, albeit in a safe setting with our passengers, and obviously remaining safe in terms of how we test it. But the objective is to put the end users in situations where they've been trained, they've been briefed, they've been given the tools around cybersecurity, and to see what happens. And we're talking to the DFT about that. We're talking to the regulator about that. And the point is essentially to effectively test our readiness when we deploy these big digital systems to confirm that everyone's done their bit. Actually, when you add the parts up, we're actually secure when things go wrong. And rest assured, I don't think we're looking at a single line of defense. There's always multiple lines of defense, just like with safety. So this isn't about scaring the industry, but it's that building that additional confidence, because when we put track and train together, equally, they're equally important when it comes to cybersecurity.
Kelly, did you want to jump in on that?
No, I was nodding furiously because I think the railway's got such a strong safety and risk culture. And like, I'd love to see that extended into cybersecurity as it adopts more technology, right? So I couldn't agree with you more, Anjay, in terms of like that being everybody's responsibility. So, at a macro level, it's the industries, and then there's organizations within the industry, and then there's the individual care that people need to take and that vigilance.
Question from James Thompson. It's quite a long question, so I'll try to praise it. But how will National Rail and GBRX address the need for mobile connectivity for both rail passengers and the railway OPS community? Currently, obviously, on the digital journey with 5G, then it's going to move towards 6, 7G. Is it basically jumping ahead of where the railway currently is? Wall of silence.
I'm not sure that anybody here could answer that, but we heard Tufik talk about the opportunity spaces that they are looking at in GBRX, and I know passenger and customer experience is like a massive theme for them, right? And so, I don't know if it belongs in that bucket, but I think that there's no shortage of initiatives that are happening in that space, and absolutely you need 5G and connectivity to do some of these things, but where I think they're trying to come in is almost as that like coordination body to like bring these initiatives together to really create a system-wide impact.
Matt Bowman says, what's your experience in using digital twins and modeling techniques and signaling supporting migration towards new technology? Anjay, you're nodding.
Yeah, quite a bit. I think I come back to something I said earlier. It's imperative that we adopt this approach. We can't afford to use access like we have conventionally used access, and Taron pointed that out earlier as well. There is already lots of proven techniques to create digital twins for signaling systems and to validate those twins. My personal experience of doing this at TfL, where we did this on a program called 4 Lines Modernization, where we effectively created a completely integrated digital twin of the signaling system in multiple facilities, accessible remotely. We were using this digital twin to prove the system during COVID out of people's garages. So it's proven from my experience. What I would say is, as an industry, we have to get behind that. So I might be repeating myself from what I said earlier, but we have to recognize the value of that. We have to get behind trusting that technology and really use it to stress the system, bring the end users closer to it. It's not just about an engineering solution. We've got to bring the operators. So when I was talking about people in garages, I genuinely am saying we had operational representatives that were representing the signalers testing out of garages in COVID on a digital twin that was running remotely in the cloud. So this is proven. We've got to get behind it on the main line.
Tamsin Dangerfield's possibly the last question we've got time for, says, are we learning from other countries who may be further ahead than we are in developing innovative tech in the railway? Is that something, Taron, that you are doing, that it's a collaborative experience?
Yes. We have formed cooperation with a lot of international partners. We have regular meetings with our colleagues in Japan and Korea. not to mention around Europe as well. We have partnerships formed with our Scandinavian representatives from Norway, Sweden, also from the Netherlands, Switzerland, SNCF in France, FRA in USA, Transport for New South Wales, and Canada Rail. We're constantly having meetings together, exchanging lessons learned, best practices. If they've trialed a new technology, we look at their trial data and see if there's an adaptation case for us. Can we actually use this? This sort of symbiotic relationship we have with our international partners is obviously reciprocal in all areas. It helps us look at R&D in a different light, because as well we get to look at the parameters of how long they run a test for. So if we're going to do this similar sort of safety case test, we won't have to do it half a year like our colleagues in Australia did. We can only do it for 3 months. So there's a lot of benefits from that, and we're constantly learning and constantly sharing these ideas. Not to mention within the sector itself, that there's lots of bodies which allow regular communities of practice to get together to look at signaling, to look at overhead lines, to look at pathway designs, which we are regularly part of, and we encourage our colleagues to be heavily involved in.